You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Hi, my name is Dr. Teodros Avery. I'm the Jazz Studies professor here at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. Welcome. This is the first session of the class entitled Key Movements, The Age of Jazz. I'll be using two books. This is the first book right here. It's called The Jazz Age, Popular Music in the 1920s by Arnold Shaw. The second book that I'll be using is this one right here, African Americans in the Jazz Age, A Decade of Struggle and Promise by Mark R. Schneider. So you might want to purchase these two books so that you are in the know and on the same page with us as we travel through this time in music and culture. So during this class, I'll be covering many different topics, and I'll talk about many different figures who are important to the jazz age. That's very important because some of these people shaped music not only in jazz, but they moved on, their influence moved on outside of jazz into popular music or pop music as we know it today. One of those people is Duke Ellington. Now you see Duke Ellington, he's there at the piano, smiling as he's playing the chords. And then you've got his band members right there with their horns on the piano, leaning into the piano. You see the drum set in the front. And then you can see in the back the horn players. And so this is typically what his band looked like when they were at the Cotton Club. They're looking very dapper, very sharp. Matching suits, shine shoes, hair looked good. These were real performers, real entertainers. And some of you might know who Duke Ellington is and some of you might not, but what I can do is for the people who think they might know him but are not sure, I can play one of his melodies, which I'm sure you have heard before. So this one right here is called the A Train, and the reason why they called it the A Train is because people would get on the A Train to go uptown to Harlem, right? So say if you were in Brooklyn or you were in Lower Manhattan and you wanted to go hear some really good jazz and see some great dancers and just really enjoy yourself up in Harlem, you would get on the A Train and you would go uptown. And so this is a song that he wrote for that moment, right? So it's like this. So I'm sure some of you have heard that melody. That's probably his most famous melody that he wrote. I mean, there were many other ones, there were many other great melodies, but this is probably the most popular. Like when you say Duke Ellington, you have to say the A Train. If you were to speak to somebody and say, do you know Duke Ellington? And they said, I'm not sure. And then you say, well, do you know the A Train? And that was probably his biggest hit. There are others as well, but that's the one that's like the, right down the middle, like everyone knows it. So we're looking at Duke Ellington and his Cotton Club Orchestra. After him, we will move on to Louie Armstrong. I'm sure you know who he is. This man right here is the reason why people know jazz trumpet the way they know it. He was the person to really take that instrument out of just being a lyrical instrument to being its own sound and own entity within jazz. He was also a great entertainer. He sang as well. He scatted. You know what scatting is? Scatting is a vocalese language where you speak notes but actually make sounds or words that don't mean, they're not words that are spelled out, like Scooby Hooby Hoop Hop to Hooba Doo Ba. That's him. Louie Armstrong brought that to jazz. He's from New Orleans, traveled away from New Orleans up to Chicago, cut his teeth there, and then eventually went to New York and to the world. It really changed how the world heard jazz. Very, very important figure. Self-taught. He was raised in an orphanage. His parents couldn't care for him, but then he found music and the music cared for him, and then he changed the world with the music. Very, very important figure right there. So after we talk about Louie Armstrong, we're going to talk about the great migration of African Americans out of the South during the Jim Crow South. This is very, very important because while the African American population was in the South, you're talking about after Reconstruction, during the Jim Crow era, after slavery, African Americans wanted something better in their lives, and they wanted a better life for their children, for their families, and for themselves. And so one of those steps to getting to that better life was to leave the Jim Crow South, because the Jim Crow South living was very hard on African Americans. And you're talking about, violence every day, I mean, as a way of life, So a lot of them left because of the growing hostility towards them and the lack of economic opportunity. You're talking about people who are working on pretty much a plantation, but after slavery. So there was not a lot of opportunity economically. They had to leave. And so they did, and they packed their bags, and they moved up to the cities where the industrialization was taking place, cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, those big cities where things were going on, steel mills, the building of automobiles, all these different industries that offered promise and opportunity to African Americans. They left, they migrated out of the South. Some stayed, but many left because they wanted better opportunities. So we'll talk about that as well. And then when we get up to New York, we're going to talk about the Flappers. The Flappers were a group of ladies who, during the women's suffrage movement, they sought to achieve equality and independence, and they did so. And a flapper was a woman who would flap her wings goodbye to oppressive situations dealing with men, basically, and they wanted away from that, So flappers were all about a new attitude. You see the ads like, "You've come a long way, baby," things like that. That's for the flappers. So it's very important to identify that, because they are the female component that say, "Hey, we've had enough. We want to be treated as equals to men. We want to be able to achieve the same thing out of life as men." And so they were in pursuit of that at all costs. So you're talking about, how they carried themselves, how they dressed. They were really leaving an old way of thinking, an old way of thinking about them as women. So they wanted to dress how they wanted to dress. They wanted to dance. They wanted to speak how they wanted to speak. They were not waiting on men to give them the green light in terms of them being worth something and being the type of people who want to go out there and live their life. They were independent in that way. So they're very important because that attitude allowed women across all races to aspire to be free and to be autonomous. So they are very important as well. After we're done with the flappers, we're going to move on to the New Negro movement. Now, the New Negro movement the New Negro was a phrase that was important because when you had people coming out of the South during the migration, it was also their minds that they were trying to change in terms of how they saw themselves, how they spoke up for themselves, what they saw themselves as, really trying to be in control of, their destiny. And so there were different people like Marcus Garvey and leaders like that who were part of the New Negro movement. Alan Locke, he was an intellectual. He was the person that termed or coined the term, the new Negro. And so it was a different way of thinking. It was a different way of carrying yourself, being proud of who you are. And that movement was the catalyst for the civil rights movement that happened later. Had this movement not happened, we would have not had Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, those people in the same way. They would have existed, but they would have been different. These people laid down the groundwork for those civil rights leaders. So it's very important to notify and be aware of the new Negro. It was a new way of thinking. And that new way of thinking transferred to music and art, right? So, even though someone like Marcus Garvey was not an artist, there were artists during that time that were listening to him, and then when they created and they wrote and they created songs and dance, there was a different type of way that they expressed themselves because they felt free, they felt they wanted to aspire to be better than their previous generation. And so that's what the new Negro movement will be about, and we'll go into it a lot more in depth later. And so then we'll move on to the blues and the various different styles that the blues embodies. And we'll talk about rural blues and how it influenced jazz, right? And so, we'll talk about the different elements of the blues, the sound of the blues, what the blues was about as a means of expression. That's very important. And how that music influenced other styles of music, right? Because the blues is still heard today. We go and we hear music today, and we're not aware of where they're getting a lot of their styles, their vocal styles from, their guitar styles. A lot of those styles is coming out of this music right here. And we'll talk about it later, but I'm just kind of giving you some hints that I'll be really relating the past to the present. That's going to be very important. Then what we'll do is, the point of mentioning the blues and this next style is to give you a foundation for jazz, right? So we have the blues, and then we have ragtime music. So we'll explore the sound of ragtime, what are the elements of ragtime, what made people like it, why was it different from the other styles of music, and how that led to being such a popular music amongst people. Because ragtime eventually moved on and influenced the world. And so we'll talk about how it influenced the world, what tools helped it influence the world, right? And then how those elements were added to jazz. That'll be important. Another area that we'll go into will be Tin Pan Alley music. Back in these days, you had song pluggers, and these are people, basically they were like stockbrokers for music, for sheet music. So these people, as you see right here in this picture, those are different publishers in a brownstone in New York City. And there would be a street with a whole bunch of buildings like that. And these people were responsible for taking songs and going and saying, hey, I got this great song, I want you to hear it, and they would know different composers and vocalists or actually lyricists. And they would come in and they would say, hey, I've got this song, it's a great song, I think it'll be a popular hit, listen to it. And come in and they play, and maybe the publisher might say, yeah, that sounds like a hit, or maybe no, that's not gonna work. And those songs eventually became, along with blues and ragtime, became the basis for jazz, jazz that we know today. So it's very, very important. And then also we have musical theater, right? And so you see right there in the photo, we have Richard Rodgers, Irving Berlin, and Oscar Hammerstein II. Those people right there are responsible for the bulk of American music. This is a time when American music really came into its own as an identity, as a musical force in the world.
And these people, along with the blues artists, along with the ragtime artists, they all influenced jazz. And they're very important figures. They influence jazz, and they also influence the world. You know, as I've gone into the world and performed, because I'm also a saxophonist, and you know, when you perform at a festival, a jazz festival, or you know, a concert, you know, these are the people. These people I'm showing you. These are some of the people who the world looks to and respects and admires. You know, although here people aren't always in the know, because here we have a quick, fast kind of fast food culture of culture, you know? So it's like here and then it's gone, you know? But once you travel into the world, these are the people, some of the people that the world asks about, that they want to hear about, and that's why these people are important. And then with the whole, musical theater, if you've ever been to New York City, there's a whole, there are theaters upon theaters from this time that still exist that show different musicals by these ladies and gentlemen, and they are, packaged, for modern times, but these are like the gems of American culture that you can still go and you can see. You see on my t-shirt, Harlem, New York Jazz, or Harlem Jazz, New York. There's a whole culture in New York that still exists to a degree. There are still institutions that support and promote it. But that if you go to New York, you will see these places that some of them I'll be mentioning, and some of them will be in the books. And you'll be able to hopefully go to New York and see these places for yourself, or go hear, a show, a musical, a Broadway play, or go to the Cotton Club. I believe it still exists. It's moved. It has moved. It's not in the same location, but it still exists. And there are reviews similar to it in Harlem. I played in them myself as a saxophonist when I was in New York. I lived in New York for 15 years, so I'm giving you a New York perspective on these things. So, musical theater is one of the last links that we'll talk about. And then we'll move on to the Harlem Renaissance. Now, with the Harlem Renaissance, you have some of the greatest writers of African American culture. They really captured how African Americans were feeling as they left the South. They came to New York. They were surrounded by different people who were like them, who were thinkers, who were writers, who were dancers, musicians, composers. They all met in Harlem, right? So this is really the mecca of African American culture during this time. There were other cities that had great cultures, but Harlem was like no other. And one of the people who was special there was Langston Hughes. And he was a writer and a poet. There he is, looking dapper with the wool sport coat. Those are very hard to find, by the way. That's real wool for the people who like clothing and who are in the style. There he is right there. And he was a great writer. And he was on the cusp, not only as a writer, but he loved jazz music. And he would go to different places to hear jazz, and some of his writings would feature elements of jazz in them. So this is one of the people who interwove jazz music with writing. And that was a special gift that he had, because he could capture that feeling. And this is somebody who hung out at the jazz clubs and knew the jazz musicians and would listen to the music. The interesting thing about people like that is that they usually are low key and don't talk that much, because they're really observing. As a musician, I can attest, writers and stuff that come out, they usually just check out the music. And so when they write, they really have a real perspective on the music that is often different from someone who is immersed in the music, in the moment of the music. And oftentimes they're looking for other things that musicians are not looking for in the music aesthetically, that they'll hear other things. But this is someone who heard the music, and then he would write off of the music and then give us the gifts that he gave us through his writings. Very important figure who influenced many, many different people. All right, and then after that, we're going to go to Zora Neale Hurston.
There she is right there. Elegante, elegant, right? Hat to the side. Some of you young folks thought that was a new thing when people do it like that, right? But she was doing it like that back in the 20s. So this is one of our writers, playwrights, people who really saw a different voice. And she is an African-American woman. She saw it a different way and wanted to present herself and her perspective on life that was different from other people. It was different from Langston Hughes. And so she was important because she spoke the voice of African-American women at that time. And so we'll be talking about her work. There she is again. Yeah, nice necklace. Nice style. I always liked the style of these people back then. You know, they really exuded a certain quality, you know, that was unique, you know, unique to the times, you know. Elegant hats, nice necklaces, nice dresses, you know, really a different time, but a special time, very special time. Then after we speak about Zora Neale Hurston, we're going to move on to F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now, what's very, very important about him is that although he wasn't a jazz figure in terms of like, you know, really on jazz, he is important because he was the voice, the popular voice in the culture, right? So people who didn't know anything about jazz or about the times, he could speak a language to them through his books, through his writings, in a very broad kind of way. And you need people like that to really check out the culture because they can serve as the mouthpiece to people who would otherwise not know about the culture. He was probably the most influential writer in terms of a broad, you know, having a broad perspective or a broad reach, you know, to the masses, you know, so he's very important. And we'll be talking about him, The Great Gatsby, one of his great books, and that'll be very important to speak about. We'll make sure that we understand the difference between popular and then niche, because both are very important, and they influence the music and they influence the culture, but in different ways, and they bring different people to the music, you know. Today, you have people like him who had a broad perspective. They can make the difference between a lot of people knowing about a style of music or a culture versus it being, you know, a niche culture, you know. So that's important. That's important to the overall culture and where the culture can go, you know, as well as him being a great writer, but his influence was broad. So we'll speak about that. Then we'll travel to the different ballrooms in New York City. We'll talk about different dances. Right here, we have a couple doing the Lindy Hop. They're getting down, right? And these are very physical dances, you know. These are dances, we're not talking about a two-step, you know, left to right, left to right. This is very, very physical dancing, you know. The women were being thrown up in the air and caught and turned around and flipped around, and you know, in some ways, it was kind of like a precursor to breakdancing in a way, very physical dancing, right? And then we'll move on to the Charleston, one of the popular dances of the time. You see they're getting down right there in front of the brick building. Everybody's doing the Charleston. And these are dances that had mass influence on culture. I think there was even a candy bar called the Charleston Chew that was based off of this dance right here, the Charleston, right? And then we'll move on to another dance called the Black Bottom. That was a popular dance of the time. There she's doing the pose, yeah. And we'll talk about that as well. All right, and then we'll move on to an area where painters existed. And we'll talk about their influence and also how they were influenced by jazz, right? So you have a group of painters from the time that were not influenced by jazz, but then you have these people who, when they painted, you could see jazz or the influence of jazz in their paintings. It's kind of similar to Langston Hughes, how you could read his poetry and totally hear
the rhythm of jazz or the style of jazz within his poetry. So we'll look at Romare Bearden. You've probably seen some of his paintings in popular culture. I remember seeing his paintings in Ebony magazine when they would advertise different products, and also Jet magazine. Romare Bearden is like Langston Hughes in that he really captured the feel of jazz and really brought jazz to his paintings in a way that was really natural and also was a real part of the music. And if you look at this picture right here, you can see the trumpet player. He's taking a solo, and you can see all the musicians are looking at the trumpet player, which is how it is on the bandstand when one person is soloing. So everyone's looking at the trumpet player, and he's playing, and you can see the musicians, except the drummer is looking at you. If you can see that, he's looking right at us. So the drummer is one of those people, this particular musician, he's checking out the room, right? And the other musicians are checking out the trumpet player. And you can see that his use of colors was different from other artists during the time. He really was not shy about using different colors along with the figures that he's focusing on. So that was a unique style during that time. So then after Romare Bearden, we'll move on to Archibald Motley. And so he's similar to Romare Bearden in that he uses a lot of the colors, but his shapes are the faces are more like human beings' faces, you see. But he was another one of the important painters during that time, and today he's highly regarded for being one of the master painters of that time. Again, we're in the club. If you check out the painting, and everybody's dancing, everybody's having a good time. The lady's dancing, she's smiling. See in the back the conversation. So we'll be going through these different styles and pointing out different areas that make these painters stand out from the rest. And then we'll wind down, and then we'll start talking about the different artists or the musicians that are extensions of this area of music, right? Because we're looking at three main hubs, right? New Orleans, Chicago, and New York. And there are artists today that are extensions of that time. They may not sound exactly like them, but they are extensions. They're related. And so one of those groups is the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. Out of all the groups, they are probably the most like the original sound of New Orleans jazz. They really deal with that music in its purest form. And if you get a chance, you should go to New Orleans and you should go to Preservation Hall and hear them. They've got about 2 or 3 bands, one that tours, and a couple that actually play at the venue. And I know some of the musicians myself, and if you want to hear that music in its most purest form, you should go there and really hear them and hear how they play the music. But they are, still an extension that they are here today, and they're not going to be exactly like the music from back then. That's impossible. But they are extensions of that music. Then we're going to go into the Dirty Dozen Brass Band. There they are right there. You see they are one of the groups out of New Orleans as well that captures that feel of that music, and so this style of music is real. It's music of the people, It's street music, and it's got that feel when you hear them. If you get a chance, you go to YouTube or wherever you go to listen to music. You go there and just listen to that music, and you're going to hear there's a certain attention that the musicians they command, and you're going to hear that, and that's part of the real people music, the street music in New Orleans. They really capture that sound. When you get a chance, if you have not been to New Orleans, and you go down there, one of the things that you'll be happy to witness, if you're open to it, are the street bands in New Orleans, So you might just be like walking down the street, with your friend, talking, and then all of a sudden, about 7 or 8 musicians will just walk out to the curb and start playing their instruments, you know, and the way, you know, these are extensions of the marching bands from way back. And so when you hear this music, it's the music of the people. It's the street music, you know. They're not playing with stands. They've memorized everything. And when you hear those people playing, the drummer, the snare drum player is playing that snare, and the guy's playing that bass drum, you got the tuba player, and you can hear it. When you hear it, you'll know when you hear it, right? But when you hear it, you're gonna know, okay, this is what Dr. Teodoro Saber was talking about. It'll hit you. The music will really hit you, and it will not be afraid to show its face to you, right? So that's a different, you know, it's a different approach to the music than some of the other groups that play out of this style of music. For instance, the next person, his name is John Pizzarelli. He's not of that style. He has a style that's coming out of the New York jazz, you know, the jazz age out of New York. And so he has more of a vocal style, you know. He is the person that is playing a lot of those standards from Tin Pan Alley and also some of the songs from the Broadway musicals. And he's got a more, you know, of course the guitar is a different instrument than a trumpet, so it's got a more subdued sound, but he's an extension of the New York sound. And he's out here now. These are musicians you can go and you can hear them now, right? You can go to their concerts when they come through town. So this is very important because you don't want to just listen to me speak in the past tense. You want me to speak in the present tense. So if you're, you know, out on a Friday night, you want to hear some music, see who's coming through town. One of these artists might be coming through town, and you would want to really check out their music and really be connected to this class and this show, and also to the culture. You know, that's very important. And then we're going to move on to a vocalist who just kind of came up recently. Her name is Cecile Maclaurin Salvant. She just came on the scene over the past maybe 5-6 years. She's an artist that was over in France. She's American, but she moved to France and really made a name for herself there. And her style of music is coming right out of this time period, especially her first 2 albums, right? So, you know, parlor jazz, that sound, it's a certain sound that parlor jazz has. She's coming right out of that. And these are the musicians who are in the speakeasies, right? That's a term I'll be referring to, speakeasies. So the speakeasy is basically a place where you could go, listen to music, and have a drink during Prohibition, but you had to speak easy, right? Because you don't want to hear that big knock at the door, you know? So her music is coming out of that period. And she's another artist you should go out, you should listen to, you should try to support her music if you get a chance. And there will be others. I'll be having musical guests that will join me here. And these are people who are on the music scene that you can go listen to. You can say, hey, you know what? My professor, Teodoro Saber, was talking about your music, and so I just came to check you out. I'll be bringing them into the studio. They'll perform here. I'll perform a couple cuts with them. We'll really mix it around and make this not only about reading books and talking, but also hearing the sounds. That's very important. You want to hear what the music is. You want to hear examples of it so that you can feel it orally, right? Which is very important. I mean, I can talk to you about it, but you'll know when you hear it, because a lot of these things, these elements of the music you've already been hearing, but maybe you didn't have a person point it out and say, hey man, this is this. You know, when you heard that song, you heard Amy Winehouse singing, actually she was checking this out over here, you know? Or you heard, you know, so-and-so, Erykah Badu, she was singing that song, that style is coming out of here. You know, Billie Holiday was at, you know, at the different speakeasies, and she was singing like that very softly and subdued. You know, she was influenced by her, like the cross-pollination of culture and generations, which is a better word. You know, I'm going to show you how those connections are being made through the music and how people are extending a certain type of thinking, certain type of expression that's going on right now. So we'll cover all those different areas and more.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
We're always about trying to make the person's life better.
We're being taught to look at our patient not just as a being with an amputation, but a person who actually needs to learn how to cope with that amputation, and we're learning how to try and help them through it.
I get to see firsthand how the devices that I can make for them can influence them and help them, and I can see that it does them good, it helps them.
I was first exposed to the field when I was about 13. I went to an orthotics appointment with my dad, and this appointment was his fitting for bilateral knee, ankle, foot orthoses. So basically, leg braces all the way up his legs. And we went, and he put them on, and it was the first time he had walked in 6 years. And that's really the moment I knew, like, this is where I was supposed to be.
You know, it seemed like a good melding of different areas in my life that had interest to me: artistry, medicine and science, as well as helping people day to day. And I felt like it was a more direct way to help impact someone's life immediately.
Most schools in the country, most orthotic and prosthetic schools, have about 4,000 feet or 5,000 feet of square space that they can utilize. Our program has 12,000 square feet, which is fantastic for our students. We have huge clinical atrium and a big walkway that we can work with. We can bring our patients in and have a large open environment with all of our 24 students for each cohort can work with their patients independently. We are based about 13 miles south of the main campus in Los Alamitos, California. And we strategically placed this facility here because it's in the central hub for all of the clinical affiliations we have. It brings us closer to the Department of Defense down in Navy Medical Center down in Balboa. We're closer with the Veterans Hospital in Long Beach. We're closer with 3 different hospitals that are outside of Long Beach and Cerritos. And it allows us to then travel up to Dominguez Hills and travel up to Los Angeles to implement all of the clinical affiliations we have. We don't have to share patients, we can work with them independently, and each one of our students has enough space to be able to utilize their own workstation within our large laboratories. Our first-year cohorts and our second-year cohorts each have their own independent workspace.
One of the main reasons why I came here is because it has access to some pretty high-end equipment. For example, we have this gait right mat, which is pretty much just a walkway that patients can walk on. And with it, we can take a video of the patients walking so that we can analyze their gait and understand their gait deviation so that we can help improve their functions, make the proper devices for them.
One of the other really cool facilities around here is the 3D printing, where we can take scans with a couple of the different scanners that we have at school and then send the images over to the printer and have them 3D produced for us.
For me as a clinician, it's just really exciting to come here every day and work with all of these students and see how excited they get to utilize this new technology and advance the profession.
The faculty come from a fairly wide range of backgrounds. One of the newest additions, actually, her background is completely in psychology. So we're getting a very different view, more of a whole person view.
They are wonderful in helping us interact with the patients, because really patient care is the #1 thing that we have to focus on.
The faculty-student ratio here at the Orthotics and Prosthetics program at Cal State Dominguez Hills is quite unique also, because we have such a close-knit with our students. We only have 24 students per cohort, and we have 4 full-time faculty. So our students get a lot of one-on-one time.
And it's experiences like these that make me feel like I'm going to be able to walk into my residency and do what my practitioner asks me to do.
I'm extremely excited about the possibilities we have at the Orthotic and Prosthetic Program's new facility here in Los Alamitos, California. With 12,000 square feet, the biomechatronics lab, the independent labs for both of our cohorts, the new programs coming online. It's a very exciting time to be here at Cal State, and I really look forward to the progress that we'll make in helping advance our profession.
My name is Zanea Fitz, and I'm a senior here at California State University, Dominguez Hills, majoring in psychology. The reason I came to this campus was for its diversity and learning environment. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Romare Bearden, and I'm a junior here at California State University, Dominguez Hills. I'm a business major, and the reason why I chose this campus was because of its location and good business program.
Many of our brothers feel like they're a part of a family, whether it's the culture, color of the skin, or just being comfortable with other men. The bond keeps growing, and the brotherhood keeps strengthening itself through those means. The Male Success Alliance at Cal State Dominguez Hills is creating a genuine brotherhood.
It does not force you to be anything. It does not require you to be a certain type of student.
We're here emotionally, physically, and anytime a brother needs anything, we're going to be there.
A lot of times, men of color aren't seen as professional, or you don't even see them in professional settings. So the Male Success Alliance is trying to get our men ready within their undergrad to be in that professional setting because they are the professional. The manner that the program is doing this is through the concentration of being there for our brothers. The practical way of doing that is, redefining and strengthening the brotherhood, within the campus and through the workshops and different events that we have. The suit is that signal that we're trying to create. That whole changing the narrative is coming through the suit. When a man's able to be clean, they feel good. It gives this confidence and it oozes out of the guys.
Watching Dr. Franklin and Matt Smith, walk around in these nice suits, it's like, hey, I want to be like that. I want to be him one day. I want to be able to wear that nice suit.
And you see the results are better academics, more social, a better social life, and a lot of guys just want to be a part of the program because of it.
The Male Success Alliance found me in a very interesting time place, trying to balance classes. And my home life, I started to really fail in many ways. I found MSA on my verge of not being a student anymore. Meeting the actual student body president of the Male Success Alliance, I met him and it was like, nah, brother, you are my brother, and anything you need from me, just let me know.
And that's what MSA is built on. How does each one teach one, and how do we bring our brothers along with us? And that's why MSA sets that legacy in terms of, it's not just about CSU Dominguez Hills, it's this region, it's this state, and it's the nation, and these young men are going to change all of them.
My name is Alex Guerrero, and I'm a Toro.
My name is James Harris, and I'm a Toro.
I'm Jordan Sylvester, and I'm a Toro.
Maybe you know how to use some of these platforms, but do you know how to make them work for your business interests? Most programs tell you to start with great content, But do they tell you how to create that great content? Creating effective content that can build a viral momentum is the hardest part of social media marketing. That's where we come in. The certificate program in social media strategies and content marketing is a content-based course of study. During this 48-hour intensive immersion program, you will learn how to understand why some content goes viral while other content fails to gain traction. Identify your target audience, connect with them, and build them into a community. Create content that is specifically designed to inspire a positive emotional response and encourage engagement with your target audience. Distribute your content across the social platforms that are most appropriate for your specific goals. Become a thought leader in your area of expertise. This program is designed to help business owners, artists, and other creatives promote their professional ventures. If you're employed in public relations, advertising, marketing, journalism, publishing, education, or government affairs, this certificate can give you a professional edge toward promotions. If you're seeking employment in these areas, this certificate will let corporate recruiters know that you understand the importance of social media literacy. Enroll now.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
So now we're going to move on to the blues. The blues, yes, the blues. So what we're going to do is, instead of me telling you what the blues is in words, I'm going to play what the blues is in sound on my saxophone. And that's important because you probably already know what the blues is, right? And sometimes we know different things, but no one has told us that this is this in words or that is that, you know? So I believe that probably half of you already know what the blues is. You know when you hear it. So I'm going to play some blues for you so you can really get the feel of the sound, right? And specifically, what's going to happen is I can play what the blues does not sound like, and then I'll play what the blues does sound like. So for instance, like if I take a series of notes, which we call a scale, right? Okay, you got that. The blues is not based off of that. That's probably the most popular sound in American music. Okay, so what the blues does is it takes that scale or that sound and it puts what we call blues notes on that scale. And there's a lot of sliding that goes on in terms of the pitches, the sound. So there'll be like a space in between a couple of notes where there's like a half step. So instead of having right there, those are the bent notes. That bent note right there, that's a blues note or a bent note. Instead of we bend it. Right? So then you end up having a sound that's more or less, or rather I could say less perfect, but the sound is used to convey a feeling, right? And it could be a feeling about, something depressing, maybe something that pains your heart, pains your soul, might pain your life. And then sometimes you have blues that is actually happy. So you can use the same tools to play something happy in your life, right? So, but right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the blues in such a way that I bring about maybe sadness, despair, that kind of sound, that kind of feel, okay? So I'm just going to go on that.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Okay, so you got to hear me play the blues, and I hope that you heard the blues notes. I was trying to really dig into those notes more than others. I got to play a major scale or a major sound or popular, kind of happy sound, and then I played the blues. Much more attitude, more grit. And like I said, I was emphasizing those blues notes. Those blues notes are very, very important notes in creating the sound of the blues. And just being, as a performer, for people who don't perform, one of the things that performers have to do is that when they play the blues, they can't be trying to play perfect. That kind of playing will not let you achieve that blues sound. You got to be willing to get dirty and gritty with it, you know what I mean? So that's a very, very important aspect of playing the blues. But in terms of words, the blues is a secular style of music first developed by African Americans in the Deep South. And you have blues from many different regions throughout the southern United States. You have, for instance, Texas blues, which is a different style from the other regions. My family is actually from Texas on my father's side, so I know that style very well in terms of how it sounds. You have Chicago blues, which is an extension of Mississippi blues. With Mississippi blues, you have more of a rural sound or more country sound. And then you have Memphis blues, you have blues from New Orleans. Every area has its own vernacular within the music. So it's important to really point that out, that you have certain artists who come out of different regions that sound different from other artists in other regions. So it's important to note that when you're talking about the blues and when you're listening to the blues and really trying to identify the different types of sounds that come out of those different areas. Also, one of the things you want to know about the blues is that it has influenced all aspects of American music. I mean, there are people in pop right now, they're singing the blues. They're just singing it with a different, more updated sound, but it's still the blues. Basically it's like you can, it's like a person that just kind of like, maybe came out of the field from working all day, and then they got cleaned up and put on a suit and got shaved up and everything. And then, they went back out into society. That's how you're hearing the blues right now. When you hear it in pop music, it's in rock music, it's in hip hop, it's in R&B, it's in all those different styles of music. And the whole thing with the blues that's different from, say, like, gospel music, is that the blues has field hollers in the music. When I say field hollers, I'm talking about people who were working out in the fields and, be it during slavery or after slavery, and they were working out in the hot fields, and they were singing songs in the fields to help the day go by faster, right? Or even people who were in chain gangs, singing prison work songs. A lot of them, a lot of those elements in that music are in the blues, okay? So this is real deep, deep cultural music coming out of the South, and it's important to understand that it's connected to today's music, that you're hearing it when you turn on pop radio and you hear something. The way I always identify the influence of a style of music is that what I do is I check out the other styles of music during that time, and if I don't hear a certain aspect of another style in that music, then I know that music I'm talking about influenced other styles, right? So if I go to the 1920s today, right, and I say, well, let me go check out music in other areas and other cultures of the United States, and if it sounds different, there's things I look for. Listen to the rhythm, listen to how they sing the melody, listen to see if there's any blues in it. Listen to some chord changes, or if there are any chord changes. And if that music is so different from, say, like the blues, right? And then I fast forward to now, and then I listen to music today, and if I can hear the blues and those other styles of music, then I can deduce that the blues was influential, even besides my educated way of going to listen to music, right? I can do it through that way. So you'll hear elements in the music that we're going to play today. You're just going to hear it if you're open to it. But what you have to do is you have to separate technology from what you're hearing, right? So just because the recording sounds old, don't let that stop you from hearing the inflections in the vocal, you know, how the person is singing, what the person is singing about, you know. It's very easy to shut off, right? When you hear something and say, oh man, that doesn't sound like it's a new recording. But don't let that stop you from getting to the real essence and the beauty of this music. Because you'll miss it if you do it based off of technology, because this music started, you know, a long time ago. Some of these recordings, you know, 80, 90 years old. So, you know, technology was not really on their side, but it did, you know, they had what they had, right? What was allowed or available to them, and it did capture the sound. So what we're going for is the actual sound of what they're singing or what the guitarist is playing. You know, that's important. So right now we're going to listen to one of the most, I mean, he's one of the most, like the heavyweights, you know, like when you go to an encyclopedia and look up the blues, you'll probably see this man's face and name. His name is Robert Johnson, okay? And he's coming out of the Mississippi Delta. And, you know, these are guys, like I said, they were working on, you know, plantations, you know, and, you know, working out in fields. And at the end of the week, they would all have fun together at what they call a juke joint, right? So they would gather around and they would sing and dance and, you know, commune with each other and really try to let the week's end dissipate through song and celebration, right? So here we go. We're going to play a song called Kind-Hearted Woman Blues. Now I'm going to say the lyrics to you just so you can get an idea of, you know, how the song was built. So you have the first, I guess you could say verse, and it goes like this. I got a kind-hearted woman, do anything in this world for me. I got a kind-hearted woman, do anything in this world for me. But these evil-hearted women, they will not let me be. So this is straightforward music, you know what I mean? And he's saying he's got a good woman, but he's got some other ones on the side. They won't let him be who he is. And then he goes back, he says, I love my baby. My baby don't love me. I love my baby don't love me. But I really love that woman, can't stand to leave her be, right? So he's got to have this woman. He's got to have her. He loves her. Then the last verse is, ain't but the one thing makes Mr. Johnson drink. I was worried about how you treat me, baby. I begin to think. Oh, babe, my life don't feel the same. You breaks. So, you know, these are songs that are straightforward, from the heart, from the soul, and they're speaking right to a situation. That's what the blues is about. Blues is different from other styles of music. It's talking right to you. This is what's going on. I have this problem. I'm trying to deal with it. Can I do it through the music? Blue collar music. You know, it's not about, you know, enunciating perfectly on that note and, you know, word. You know, it's not about that. It's just about, hey, I got to get my feelings off because, you know, I've got some stuff on my mind. Now, what I want you to listen for, in the blues, the most common progression is a 12-bar blues. That's important to know, 12 bars, right? So basically a bar, in this situation, a bar is like you count to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a bar.
right? Without getting too deep in the music, 4 beats equal 1 bar. So basically what you do is you do that 12 times and you've got the song form. It's 12-bar blues. Now on this recording, there are only 2 instruments, guitar and vocals. So you want to listen for those instruments and really try to pick out what's going on. And then you want to listen to the blues notes that Robert Johnson is singing. And then like I just played on the saxophone, those are the notes, those are the sliding type notes, you know. Do, 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 whoa, 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 that kind of sound. So here we go. This is Robert Johnson, Kind-Hearted Woman Blues.
One thing makes Mr. Johnson drain. I swear about how you treat me, baby. I begin to think, oh, baby, my life don't feel the same. It breaks my heart when you call Mr. So-and-so's name.
That's the blues note right there. Right. So when you heard that music, what you might be thinking is that, man, that sounds like, you know, old music. And it is old, you know. It's ancient. I mean, if you really think about where music has gone up to now. But within that music, you have the ingredients for so much that's happening today, okay? And so it's important to know that this music right here is the foundation of American music in a big, big way. There are other influences, but this is like the bulk of the influence in terms of how singers sing, how guitar players play, and also how people just talk the truth in music and in a very straight ahead manner. a lot of it is coming right out of this music, out of the real rural blues, out of places like Mississippi. We're going to go to another song that Robert Johnson covers and wrote. It's called Crossroad Blues, and I'm going to read the lyrics to you. I went to the crossroad, fell down on my knees. I went to the crossroad, fell down on my knees. Ask the Lord above, have mercy, now save poor Bob, if you please. You're standing at the crossroad, tried to flag a ride. Ooh, I tried to flag a ride. Didn't nobody seem to know me, babe. Everybody passed me by. Standing at the crossroad, baby, rising sun going down. Standing at the crossroad, baby, rising sun going down. I believe in my soul now, poor Bob is sinking down. You can run, tell my friend Willie Brown. You can run, tell my friend Willie Brown. That I got the crossroad blues this morning, Lord. Babe, I'm sinking down. And I went to the crossroad, mama. I looked east and west. I went to the crossroad, baby. I looked east and west. Lord, I didn't have no sweet woman. Oh, well, babe, in my distress. So you can see he was really coming from his soul about how he feels about the music and about how he feels about his life, right? And so now we're going to play it, and what I want you to listen for, I want you to listen to how the vocal uses the blues notes again, and how the guitar tone has a sliding effect and a percussive rhythm accompaniment. So that's important. You want to listen to how the guitar is playing in a very slide way. He may even have a slide. If he doesn't have a slide, he's just doing it with his fingers. I'm not sure because I can't totally make out. But it's a woo, 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 woo. If you ever check out, certain blues guitarists, they'll pull out a little metal piece that fits over their finger, and then they'll slide on the fretboard. And so you can hear that sound here on this song. And then listen to how the guitar player is playing more like a drummer to keep time, right? So you want to check out those elements. Okay, here we go. This is the Crossroad Blues.
Baby, I'm sinking down.
All right, that was Robert Johnson. Now we're going to move on to another blues artist from the Mississippi Delta region. His name is Charlie Patton, and he was born in 1891, and he died in 1934. And he's another one of these real blues musicians, singers, and you really get the feel of what was happening in Mississippi during the time. It's real gritty music. You know, this ain't shiny shoe music. You know what I mean? But I'm saying that to make a point, and I'm gonna tie it in a little later. What we're gonna start with is a song that he wrote called "High Water Everywhere." And it's relative or related to a flood, right? And so listen to the lyrics, or listen to me speak the lyrics. So, well, backwater then rolls all around summer now. Drown me down the line, backwater then rolls at Sumner. Drove poor Charlie down the line. Lord, I'll tell the world the water done crept through this town. Lord, the whole round country, Lord, river has overflowed. Lord, the whole round country, man is overflowed. You know I can't stay here. I'll go where it's high, boy. I would go to the hilly country, but they got me barred. Now, look at here now at Leland River was rising high. Look at here, boys around Leland. Tell me, river was rising high. Boy, it's rising over there, yeah. I'm gonna move to Greenville before I leave, goodbye. Look at here, the water now, Lordy. Levee broke, rose must everywhere. The water at Greenville and Leland, Lord, it done rose everywhere. Boy, you can't never stay here. I would go down to Rosedale, but they tell me there's water there. Now the water now, mama, done took Charlie's town. Well, they tell me the water done took Charlie's town. Boy, I'm going to Vicksburg. Well, I'm going to Vicksburg for that high of mine. I'm going up that water where lands don't never flow. Well, I'm going over the hill where water, don't ever flow. Boy, hit Sharkey County and everything was down and stable. But that whole county was leaving over that Tallahatchie shore. Boy, went to Tallahatchie and got it over there. Lord, the water done rushed all over. Down old Jackson Road, Lord, the water done raised over the Jackson Road. Boy, it starched my clothes. I'm going back to the hilly country. Won't be worried no more. So it kind of sounds like Katrina, if you think about it, right? He's living down in the lowlands, river overflowed. He's like, man, I got to get up to the mountains, right? I got to get up in the hills where the water can't reach. So this is music that's really speaking to human conditions, like right there, you know, in life. Like, man, this is going on. This is that. Man, I got to write about it. That's what it is, you know. So that's important, you know, to have music that speaks right to a situation and speaks for people in the moment, you know. Now, when we listen to the recording, we want to listen for a few things. Again, we're dealing with the 12-bar blues form, the most common of all blues forms. Now, listen to how the guitar is being used both as a guitar, but how the back is being used as a drum. So he's hitting the back of the guitar like a drum, or the side, pop, pop. So you're getting a percussion type of effect from playing the guitar like that, and it keeps time really well. And then listen how the second voice is interspersed in between the singing and a very like spoken word, kind of just very informal, kind of just conversational style of speaking. And that's pretty much a call and response, and that's prevalent in this music and also in field hollers and also work songs. That there's a call and then there's a response. Somebody will say something and someone will respond to what they said, right? So you're going to hear some of that in here. It's not really prevalent, but it is there. Okay, so here we go. We're going to listen to Charlie Patton, High Water Everywhere. So we got to hear Charlie Patton. We're gonna play. Well, actually, let's really talk about what we heard. Now that was a more raw blues sound, right? Almost at times like he was yelling, right? And that was different from Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson was more subdued, a little more laid back. Charlie Patton is the screamer, right? So you got, you got the more laid back style, and then you got the screamer. And with the screamer, what I mean is the person that's screaming is that you have a more distorted tone, right? Or a more of a grinding kind of sound, more raspy, right? So even like, I want to play the difference. Robert Johnson was more like, more like a smooth kind of sound. Well, here with Charlie Patton, we got. Here's more of an attack, right? More of a, that's that raw, gritty blues sound, right? As we say, some of us call it gully. That's that gully sound, right? So you want to know the difference between those two. And that's a good transition to the next person that we're going to talk about, who is W.C. Handy. Now, W.C. Handy is from Memphis, Tennessee. But the reason why I played the Mississippi Delta blues artists such as Charlie Patton and Robert Johnson is because I wanted you to hear real country sounding blues, like real country, rural sounding blues. It's important to know what that is because this man right here, W.C. Handy, took that sound and he made it more palatable for the public, right? because he was someone who was steeped in more less secular Black American music, right? So we're talking about somebody who played church music, stuff that was more in a town's environment or a city, not city as a big industrial town, but city, but a more not country. In other words, that's what I'm trying to say. So what he did, I can't get into his head, but I can round it off that he probably heard these musicians and said, man, this is some great music, but maybe I'll just change a couple things and make it to where people of all walks of life can hear it and understand it. So he's the first person that took what these country blues artists were doing and he wrote it down on manuscript and he wrote songs and he sold it. And he sold a lot of sheet music. And this is the first person that took music that was not high society music at all. This is country, gully music. And he wrote it down and then made it available for sale. And it sold. And it's important to recognize that because he really gave a gift of music, of a real deep Southern Black culture. He really pulled that out of the culture and said, let me write it down and maybe change a couple things to where, someone who doesn't know anything about that lifestyle, that they could hear it and they could appreciate it and come to know the blues. And what's important, he's a figure like F. Scott Fitzgerald. Very important because they were coming more from a broad base, right? And so they could see and identify something and pull out what was important and share it with a large group of people. And so this is how a lot of musicians who didn't know real country blues were able to come into knowing what the blues was. His publishing company was one of a kind, and he was very successful. He made a lot of money during that time. He was really successful. So it's important to know that this guy was ahead of his time in a time when it was not that common for an African American to own his own publishing company and make a lot of money at it. So that's something important to note. And all of that work paid off, and he was given the name the King of the Blues, right? So W.C. Handy is the King of the Blues. That's important to know. He's the King of the Blues. And he shared something from the deep, deep South with the whole entire world. That's very important to note. Now, what we're going to do now, we're going to play one of his most important and popular compositions. It's called St. Louis Blues. Now, I just played for you these different songs that were real gully and raw blues sounding music, right? So now when you hear him, you're going to hear him really take it and just kind of change a few things, and it won't sound so gully, it won't sound so country, but it sounds different from, say, Bach or Mozart. So that's how you judge and hear this music, is that it wasn't as gully as the country blues, but it also wasn't classical music. This was real, American, Black American music that was, like I said, with the other Broadway composers. This is real American music, right? So this is important to note. This right here is St. Louis Blues. Let's take a listen.
So we talked about the blues and how important it was in the development of jazz. And what we want to do now is we want to talk about ragtime. Ragtime music was very important in the development of jazz as well. Now you say, well, what is ragtime? Ragtime is pretty much piano music or music written for piano. In the music, you have a steady beat on the left hand, right? And then on the right hand, you have very syncopated rhythms and melodies. And when I say syncopated, it means that they are off of the beats, very complex rhythms. So it's, you know, the bass is going boom, 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 boom. And instead of the right hand mimicking boom, 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 because that would be pretty simple. What the right hand does is it goes boom, 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 so we call that syncopated, okay? That's important to know, syncopated. Makes the music very different from the blues. With the blues, you don't have that. You don't have syncopated rhythms in the blues that we've been talking about. Blues do have that, but they're from a later period. But during this time, the blues was more simple in rhythm, and ragtime was complex. It was syncopated. So one of the most popular, or the most popular composer was Scott Joplin. And he was a pianist that wrote his own music. And he penned many different pieces, but he penned the Maple Leaf Rag. That's probably the most well-known composition in the ragtime style. Now, he was a very smart businessman. He had a lawyer, and his lawyer really explained copyright to him, and he negotiated to get 1 penny off of every song that he published when he published the Maple Leaf Rag. And the composition went on to sell over 1 million copies. So he was very smart in that he wanted to make money off of what he did, and he made sure that the laws surrounding his music reflected that reality that he wanted for himself. One thing we want to realize is that his music was not well received by critics at the time. The critics actually bashed him because this music that he was playing was so, and I'll be frank with you, it was considered to be low-class music because of the fact that it was syncopated. It had those African elements of rhythm in it, and the critics, they panned him and said that, you know, he didn't know what he was doing, didn't sound good, it wasn't good music. So what he did was he said, okay, well, I think I'm being misunderstood. So what he did was he wrote a piano book based off of clear instructions on how to play his music, because he wanted to be respected for the music that he played. So he went and he wrote this book. It's called The School of Ragtime, in which he teaches a piano player how to play ragtime in the way that he and that school of composers, how they thought it should be played. So that was pretty serious. I mean, considering that, you know, this was 1908, and you know, these are people who were coming out of, you know, the Jim Crow South. Many of them did not read, and the ones that did were frowned upon for reading. And he was ahead of his time in that he wanted to make sure he made money from his compositions, and then he could write something that said, hey, this is what I do. This is the music that I play. This is how you can play it if you want to play it. And that was important because he made sure that people respected his intelligence as a musician. And you know, all too often, artists are often misunderstood when they do something that is ahead of the curve, that is ahead of the time, and that is advanced. And sometimes the people that are listening don't know that it's advanced. So he said, hey, this is how you do it. These are how you play the chords. This is something I know I'm doing. Check this out. And so that marks the presence. I guess you could say he was one of the early music educators that was a part of the
Today we have a whole educational system built around music. You have like jazz education, you have classical education, everybody's writing their books, and he's one of the earlier people in Black American music who actually was a part of that movement to educate people about, African American music. So he's very important in that way as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to listen to the Maple Leaf Rag, and like I said, listen to the fact that you have the lower bass of the piano playing a steady rhythm, and then on the right hand is where the syncopated rhythms and melodies come in. And so just listen for that, and listen also that there are repeated sections. If you can follow the melody, there are repeated sections and there's form to it. It's very advanced music. And here we go. This is Scott Joplin, the Maple Leaf Rag. So that was Scott Joplin. And I also wanted to point out, for the people who know music and chords and everything, Scott Joplin's teacher was a German piano teacher. And if you listen closer, you can hear the influence of Bach and Beethoven in terms of the chord voicings in there. You can really hear that German minor sound in what he's playing in certain points. So he took that European chord progression or chord structure, and he mixed that with the blues, that kind of happy, kind of bluesy sound. Not the other type of blues sound, which is more country, more a little sad. This is more of a happy blues sound, right? So he took those two sounds and he mixed them together and created his own sound in ragtime music. So we took the blues, we added it with ragtime, and then we come to jazz, right? So by the time we get to jazz, now jazz is not only, it doesn't only consist of the blues and ragtime. There are other elements, but those are two big elements
that are in jazz. Now, someone might say, well, what is jazz? Okay, basically jazz is improvised music, right? And the musicians, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, this is a form that we're gonna play, or a series of steps for people who don't know music. This is a form that we're gonna play, and say it's 32 bars long, or like I said earlier, count to 4 32 times. That's the form. After you get to the 32nd bar, you repeat. And so what the musicians do is that they'll repeat it, and then they'll start to make up their own ideas within the song. Around this time, jazz has changed over the years, but around this time, they're playing a melody over a form, and then they're starting to change the melody, and then they're starting to improvise. Improvisation is a big part of jazz, and often in jazz, it's built upon the pre-existing form that the musicians have decided upon. So they might take a blues composition and say, okay, we got these 12 bars, we're gonna play this melody twice, and then we're gonna come back and then we're gonna make up things on the spot, right? So this musician, when it's his or her turn to solo, that musician is just gonna say, you know, they're gonna take you on a ride, they're gonna tell a story with their instrument, and they're gonna make up ideas. Some of the ideas will be what we call the language of jazz. So you may have heard it before in terms of it being an idea or a motif, but then it might be changed into another key. It might be embellished. They might take it and say, okay, well, I'm gonna change it around and put something else on it. So improvisation is a big part of jazz. Now, the fundamental rhythm of jazz, the swing rhythm, is coming from an African rhythm in West Africa, New Guinea, and it's called dun dun ba, right? Dun dun ba. And so a way to remember this if you don't know anything about music is to take this, I take this character from this cartoon I grew up with, Scooby-Doo, right? So I say, Scooby-Doo, 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 ting-ta-ting, 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 Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo, ting-ta-ting, ting-ta-ting. That's a swing rhythm. So if you don't know music and you don't know swing, just think about Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo, and just keep it saying it over and over, and that's basically a swing rhythm on the ride cymbal that musicians play in jazz. Very important rhythm. Next we have European song structures. That's a big part of jazz. You know, you take in African rhythms, putting it with European harmony and chord structures, okay? So it's important to know that. The piano itself, that's from Europe, right? So you need to know that. You need to know that you got African rhythms, European harmony. You put it together, right? And then what we do is we go back to the blues. Remember when we were listening to the blues and it had those blues notes? We want to take those blues notes and add them to Scooby-Doo or Dun Dun Ba and those European chord structures. That's very, very important to know that. Within the music, that's that's 3 different points. Actually 4, because I said improvisation. So improvisation, syncopated rhythms, European chords and chord structures, blues notes from the blues, and then we have the call and response. That's a big part of jazz, right? So you say, and this is prevalent in the church, you know, in the church, in the Black American church, and also in the field hollers and the work songs. So someone might say, oh, no, 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 and then everybody says, oh, wah, wah, wah. And then the person says, oh, no, oh, and they say, oh, wah, 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 right? And so you can hear that all throughout different styles of Black American music coming out of the South. You know, it could even be, you know, I could bring it up to a modern time. You say a song like Moanin' by Bobby Timmons, which is directly out of this style. You can go and listen to this Moanin' by Bobby Timmons, which Art Blakey played. So the melody says, ba 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 ba, and then the rest of the band goes bing boom. So the call is bum ba da ba da bum ba bing boom bum 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 ba 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 bing boom. That's the response. So call, response. That's a big part of jazz. And then you've got the emotional aspect of jazz. During this time, you have to remember that Black Americans were experiencing a lot of difficulties in society, and that a lot of that came through the music because they couldn't really say anything about it. There were just a lot of things that really made the music sound a certain way. Lynchings, flogging, a lot of things, that were just very negative. But through the music, Black Americans found joy and also found an outlet to really play how they felt to make them feel better, and also to address those feelings through the music. So that feeling, you got to remember those emotions. That's a big part of the music, a big part of jazz, emotional music.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Okay, so we ask ourselves, when was the Jazz Age? The Jazz Age began around the end of World War I, which is around 1918, and it ended around 1929, which is the beginning of the Depression. But in general, we just say the 20s. That happened around the 20s. Okay, so what's important to note is that during this time, there were a lot of changes, a lot of shifts going on politically, socially, and economically. You had the migration of African Americans. You had women who wanted to live their lives differently, didn't want to be oppressed by men, and wanted to control their own destiny. And you had all these shifts going on. So the music is a part of that. You also had, this is something important to note, the youth were a part of the jazz culture during that time. So it was then what hip hop is today, that it was music and culture that challenged the social norms. That's important to note because it was edgy, and it was also frowned upon by the traditionalists in society, right? So also from the music, people heard this new music, it was different, it got people all heated and excited, and people who didn't want to see that viewed it as a threat. Also the fact that the women were wearing dresses that, the way they wanted to, instead of the Victorian style, extremely covered up and everything. They were going for a more French style, more free feeling and flowing in terms of how they wore their clothes and conducted themselves. So the Jazz Age is a part of those experiences. Then you have the Harlem Renaissance, where you had the best African-American intellectuals all coming together to write plays, poetry, novels. These were people who were attending universities like Harvard University, really stellar institutions. And so they were going back to their communities with a different perspective because they had been around, other cultures at other institutions. And so when they went back, they were creative. They wanted to do good. They wanted to lift their culture up. And so that was happening in Harlem. So all this shifting was going on during the Jazz Age, and that's important to note. Now, you say, well, why was it called the Jazz Age? Well, F. Scott Fitzgerald coined the term the Jazz Age, and what he meant was that it was a time of anything goes, right? Anybody could do what they wanted. They could be who they wanted to be, and that was different. Up to that point, society was very conservative. You had people who were just living their lives to the fullest. When you see some of these movies from that time, you can tell that they were just, very celebratory in the way they lived their life, the way they drank their drink, partied and listened to music. So that was why it was called the Jazz Age, and that's important to note. We say, where was the Jazz Age? Well, the Jazz Age
was in New York City, it was in Chicago, it was in New Orleans. Those were the dominant cities. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't anything going on in the other cities, but those were the centers, the epicenters of the Jazz Age. I mean, you could even note that the Jazz Age reached around the globe. It reached to Paris, and it was also influenced by Paris, right? So, you know, it was, but the main centers were New York, Chicago, and New Orleans. And that's very important to note. These are, I keep saying that's important to note because those are the areas you want to focus on. Whenever I say that's an important thing to note, you should do that. You should know that. So that was the Jazz Age. Okay, so that concludes our first session. And I hope you learned about the areas we will be talking about during this class, and then also about the blues and ragtime and all the different elements that make that music be what it is for jazz, and how jazz has the different elements, you know, understanding improvisation, you know, all those different aspects. You want to know all of that information. And I thought that it would be good for me to end the session with a song by one of the composers from that time. This is a composition called Mac the Knife, and it was very popular during that time. And there was a musical called Maury Tot, which it was a part of. And it was by Bernie Clary Holt. So I'm going to play Mac the Knife for you, and then we'll see you on the second session, all right? Thanks a lot, and have a good week.
Thank you.